Hello everybody, welcome to the video. I hope you're all doing well. It's officially October, the month of Halloween. I'm joined today, as indeed we all are, by the omnipotent presence of Satan. There is also a dog, so if you hear any dog-based noises, don't panic, yet. So yeah, in the spirit of Halloween, I thought I would do something that I've been meaning to do for quite a long time, but I've never actually been asked to put the list together, but now I have. Films that scare me. As a horror fan and something of an alpha male, there's not really a whole lot that still affects me. So when a film that I watch does kind of freak me out or get under my skin, I find it really noteworthy. So I've put together a list. It kind of falls into a couple of categories. There's films that scared me when I first watched them. There's films that still sort of freak me out now. There's no real order to them. It's just some films that I looked in my unit and picked out. That I still find quite creepy, and I thought I'd share them with you today. And without sounding like a proper YouTuber, I genuinely am interested in what your opinions are on these, so let me know if you've seen these films, and also in the comments let me know what films still scare you, what films affected you when you saw them when you were younger. And without further ado, we'll crack on. Now, just as a sort of light introduction, I wanted to mention two films that scared me when I was a kid, not even horror films. The first one is the Grinch! That scared the shit out of me. The rest of the film I was fine with, that moment didn't like. Secondly, Home Alone 2. More specifically, the moment where Marv gets electrocuted and turns into a skull with like his grey hair all like in a massive Bob Ross afro. I used to genuinely go and crawl under the dining room table when I knew that bit was coming up, and I've only recently stopped doing so. And just a last thing to mention, it's not a film that scared me, but it's some artwork that scared me. At my dad's house where I used to live, there was always like a cupboard full of VHS tapes, and on top, I think I mentioned this before, was a VHS of this film here, but the artwork was the same, Madman. That used to really freak me out. It was always sat on the top, so it was always sort of staring me in the face. I just thought, what sort of film is this? Turns out it's quite a fun little slasher movie. But yeah, I really like that poster artwork. I know the artwork on the inside is really lovely, but just for pure nostalgia, I've kept the original poster that freaked me out as a kid. Right, now on to the proper list. As I say, they're not in any real order. I'll kind of let you know my feelings on them as I go through them. So, we're going to start with The Fog. Now, The Fog is one of those films that I saw at just the right age where it really kind of... It didn't scare me, but it just kind of freaked me a little bit. I still to this day think this is an extremely underrated movie and is probably kind of a perfect ghost story, of which there aren't as many as you'd probably think. But yeah, the whole atmosphere of this film, how the soundtrack is so atmospheric and eerie. There's some really genuinely tense moments in this film. The part where they're in the car trying to reverse away from the house is a standout. The part on top of the lighthouse roof is a standout. That, in fact, is probably the bit I remember most from watching it as a kid. But yeah, I'm not going to dwell on these too long because a lot of these are relatively famous and I think you've probably seen them already. But yeah, still to this day, it's one of my favourite movies. It still kind of creeps me out a little bit. Just little touches that kind of, I don't know, where the fog's rolling up the hill and you can just about see the legs of the ghosts walking with the fog. Little bits like that. Really love this film. So yeah, I would categorise this as still freaks me out a little bit. So yeah, that's The Fog. And again, similar category for the original Night of the Living Dead. Now I know it's an older film, it's 1968, it's black and white, it's low budget, and it doesn't really have any right to be as good as it is, but it is a fantastic movie. And yeah, this genuinely really affects me still when I watch it. Will you stop scratching in your bed, dog? Again, with this one, I think it's more the atmosphere, because it just feels so bleak. A lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with the fact it's in black and white, and, you know, it's a depressing story anyway. But, yeah, it's an atmospheric movie. The bit on the staircase scared me when I first saw it. But what really gets me in Night of the Living Dead is the last, I want to say, 20 or so minutes after, is it Tom and Judy go out to the gas pump? As soon as that incident happens, the last portion of the film from there on is so fucking intense, I think. Especially for a film made at this time. You know, you see characters just fucking die just out of the blue. You see you know, kids eating their parents. You see, I'm not going to mention the ending, just on the off chance you haven't already seen this, but the ending on this is horrendous. Yeah, I mean, I know I can go on and people will probably laugh at me and say, oh, it's a little bit crap. I mean, I disagree for a starter, but yeah, the last 20 minutes of Night of the Living Dead, I think, is genuinely some of the most unsettling and creepy and intense horror cinema that I personally have seen. So yeah, lovely release as well from Criterion. Now, I don't actually own this next film, so I've got nothing to show for it, but it's a film I saw when I was younger and it still scares me now. It is M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. Now, I don't know what it is, there's something about alien abduction movies, even the slightly crap ones, that I find really, really unsettling. And I think that started with the film I'm going to talk about next, because I think I saw that before Signs. But yeah, Signs, it's a really fantastic movie. It's one of M. Night Shyamalan's best. And again, it's sort of just, it's one of those films where you put yourself in the shoes of the characters in the film, where, you know, people often get criticised for making stupid decisions in horror films, but then you watch Signs and you sort of think, well, I wouldn't do any better, because, you know, they might make silly decisions, they might not know what to do, but neither would you. And there's a moment in that film which is one of the biggest jumps I think I've ever had in a film, and if you've seen it, you know which bit I'm talking about, the bit at the birthday party. That bit, did not like. So yeah, Signs is up there as a film that still scares me, as is, I'm going to link these two together because they're a little bit similar, the Macpherson tape, which is kind of an early found footage movie. And it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint it because I'm sure there's two versions of this film. I don't know if there's like an original and a remake that were made roughly around the same time. I think one of them's called the Macpherson tape, one of them is called the Macpherson tape Incident at Lakeside County or something like that. And I think it's that second one that I saw as a kid. It's like a found footage film spliced in with documentary style interviews and, you know, sort of people who, they're obviously not real, but as a kid, I didn't know that. You know, scientists talking about aliens and alien abduction, all sort of linked into the backdrop of this found footage. I think it's Thanksgiving, it's like a family dinner, aliens arrive, and yeah, there's a lot of moments in that film that really, really freaked me out as a kid. Particularly, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find footage for this one because it's a little bit obscure.
Why is this happening?
Hey, Renee! Tommy, no! Tommy, get back in! Guys, they're in the house, man! Come on, he's trying to get out! Shut up! Quick, the light! Where's the light?
The part where, I think, is he changing his clothes or something in the bedroom and he takes the camera? There's a moment there, there's red lights appearing like through windows and stuff, there's silhouettes walking past windows, the ending is horrendous. Yeah, it's you know, it's one of those films that I don't think many people have seen, or at least I haven't heard many people talk about it. So if it sounds like your sort of thing, seek it out. It might be, I haven't seen it in about 15 years, it might be naff, do you know, it might be one of those things where I look back on it and I think, oh, but I'm mentioning it here because it's one of the films that as a kid really stands out to me as freaking me out, and it, I think, led to my sort of iffiness around alien abduction movies like Signs. So yeah, that's the Macpherson tape. This one isn't a horror film, but if you've seen it, you will no doubt agree with me. Oh my god, I did not think this lighting through. Yeah, Threads. Now, this was aired on the BBC in, I think, 1984. And it's a docudrama about nuclear war. It's kind of like a soap opera-ish thing to begin with, where you're just following sort of, you know, people through their day-to-day life with the backdrop of news reports and newspapers and, you know, prices in supermarkets going up, the risk is increasing, and then I think it's about halfway through the film, yeah, shit in Sheffield doesn't go well. And it kind of follows the aftermath of an attack. It is the most bleak film I've ever seen. It's in the same ilk as something similar made in the 60s called The War Game, which again I think was made for the BBC but didn't air because they decided at the last minute they weren't going to do it. That was a black and white one. I think there was an American film called The Day After, which touches on similar notes, but most people tend to agree that if you want a film that's going to make you a pacifist for life, then this is it. It's not scary in the sort of sense that the rest of the films in this video are scary. It's not sort of like boo scary. You hit the end of the film and you're like, wow, I have changed as a person. It's that kind of I think disturbing is more of an accurate word for this than scary, as much as it is scary. And I would urge anyone to see this. It's not a very nice film at all. It's not a film many people would want to watch more than once, I don't think, because it really is quite affecting. But yeah, it's well worth a watch, especially if you're into docudramas, as I kind of am, it would appear, because there's been a couple so far. Yeah, a couple? The Macpherson term kind of is. But yeah, if you want a solid war movie, war movie, it's a movie about war. It's not like Apocalypse Now war movie, but Threads, good little movie, and horrible. Again, onto a couple that I don't own, and I've linked these two together because I believe my grandma introduced me to them. And they were films that I feel like I watched around her house when I was bunking off from school. And they are the original The Blob and the original William Castle House on Haunted Hill. Now these, I can't claim that these still scare me. I think most of the films that I've talked about so far, apart from The Grinch and Home Alone, still kind of have a bit of an effect on me. These fall into the category of The Grinch and Home Alone, where it was because I watched them as a kid that they freaked me out. They were a little bit hokey. But yeah, I mean, The Blob, I distinctly remember genuinely thinking it was a threat. Thinking I'm going to turn around and there's going to be a big red blob of jelly on the window. I haven't seen the remake, incidentally, but apparently it's quite good. And the shot of the blob coming through the cinema doors, and because they've done it in a model and it obviously looks loads bigger than it is, that stands out to me. And that freaked me out as a kid. The other one, House on Haunted Hill, is genuinely a film I had to pluck up courage to watch again, even at the age of 16, 17. It's a film from the late 50s, made by William Castle, who loved his gimmicks. Vincent Price is doing his usual, fantastic, but, admittedly a little bit silly performance. But it's still, I think as older vintage horror films go, I think The House on Haunted Hill is probably one of the scarier ones, because it kind of shows things that you don't expect in a film from that time. You get severed heads and hanging bodies and all sorts of weird stuff. And that jump scare, if you've seen it again, you'll know what I'm talking about. That jump scare killed me, near enough, as a kid. It's still, I'll watch The House on Haunted Hill with people and that bit's still sort of oh. Because you don't expect jump scares in movies like that. But yeah, effective little movie, I think. It's silly. I mean, if you saw it in the cinema at the time, I think they had a skeleton that came out and hovered above the audience. That kind of gives you an idea of what sort of film it is. You're not going to put it on now and be oh! But yeah, as a kid, House on Haunted Hill and The Blob really, really quite affected me. This, again, we're going back to films that still freak me out. David Cronenberg as a filmmaker kind of weirds me out. Not as a person, but as a filmmaker, because his films kind of have a tendency to be unsettling in a way that I'm yet to find another filmmaker's films to be. They kind of get under your skin and stay there. And he's done better films than the one I'm about to show, but the one that affects me the most is his... is it his feature-length debut? I think that he did Crimes of the Future and Stereo before this. I think they were feature-length. But yeah, this is his first sort of commercial movie. Shivers, also known as They Came From Within in America. 1975, I think Barbara Steele's in this, Lynn Lowry's in this, Joe Silver's in this. And it's got that kind of perverse sexuality about it that makes it really kind of, move about in your seat, uncomfortable to watch. It concerns an apartment block that's isolated from the rest of the world. It's kind of like a self-sufficient place. They've got doctors and dry cleaning and cafes and things like that. If you live there, you can work there and you can stay there, essentially. And there is a doctor who is experimenting with the idea of parasites as replacement organs. I vaguely remember it being a little bit like stem cell, where you could, if someone's liver stopped working, you could generate a parasite that would then act as the liver, and you could put it in. But the side effect of these parasites is that they make people sexually aggressive and, lose all their inhibitions. And it kind of follows how the parasites infect this apartment block. And it's a little bit kind of 70s, the effects are a bit, but it's not about that, it's about the atmosphere it generates, which is really manic and unsettling at times. The ending, again, is really, really bleak. The bit, you know, where, again, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but the creatures coming up and over the hill as the character is trying to escape, I think is really unsettling. The music in this, I know it's stock music, but it's really well chosen. I think it really adds to the atmosphere. And yeah, it's not a film I genuinely want to recommend, because it's, a lot of people, I imagine, won't like this film because of how uncomfortable it is. But if you think you can give it a go and you like kind of grindhouse 70s horror, this is a good little candidate. Another one is the one he did after this, called Rabid, with Marilyn Chambers. Again, it's got the same kind of atmosphere, but I didn't include it in this list because it doesn't affect me as much as Shivers does. But yeah, that's David Cronenberg's Shivers. Next up, we go to the British company Amicus Films with Tales from the Crypt. Vault of Horror is good, but Tales from the Crypt is the one we're going to talk about. Amicus made what they call anthology horror films, where they're feature length, but they feature maybe 4 or 5 different stories, all kind of linked in with one narrative. So here we've got a group of 5 people exploring a cave, and they get kind of caved in with this, is he a monk? I vaguely remember him looking like a monk, and he kind of, is he telling their future, you know, one by one, and each one of them is a story. Good cast in this. You've got Patrick McGee, you've got what's his name, he was a big actor as well, who played the Ralph Richardson, I want to say. Joan Collins is in this, Ian Hendry's in this, a really good British cast. And yeah, all of the stories in this, with these portmanteau style horrors, you tend to find that there's like 1 or 2 good stories, then the other 2 are a little bit meh. This is probably the only one where I think every story is really good. So you start off with, is it called An All Through the House? It's like a Christmas story with Joan Collins. That's the one I think that people find the scariest. They're only basic narratively, you know, they're only on for like 15-20 minutes, so they can't really do too much, but still genuinely very creepy.
He's here, Mummy. I let him in. It's Santa.
You've got a story with Ian Hendry, who gets mutilated in a car crash, and there's a moment where he sees his own reflection. That stands out to me as creeping me out as a kid. The story at the Blind, the Institution for the Blind, where they get a new kind of manager and he's an absolute bastard, so they decide to get back at him in a kind of early instance of a Saw, like, you know, trap scenario, which is a little bit unsettling. What other stories are in Tales from the Crypt? There's a story, there's the kind of monkey's paw story, you know, where you get 3 wishes and some stupid bitch decides that I want my husband to be alive forever. Yeah, that doesn't end well. What's the 4th story? Does it say? Oh god, I've just seen him on the back there. Peter Cushing as well is in this. Probably the most affecting story as well, Peter Cushing's story. He's a really genuinely lovely old man who gets harassed to, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, it's a sad story and it's really, really horrible. As I say, Vault of Horror is good. They did other Amicus anthology films, but Tales from the Crypt has some genuinely creepy stories in it, and all 5 of them are really, really good. So if you're into that sort of thing, that's a really good recommendation. And speaking of anthologies, Creepshow 1 and 2. I don't own the first one, but I do own the second one. Not the whole film, but if you've seen Creepshow 1, I'm going to say it's the last story with the cockroaches. If you've seen Creepshow 2, I'm going to say it's the raft story. What's the and the hitchhiker as well in this. That's a really, really horrible story. These Creepshow, if you haven't seen them, they're kind of like comic book style, you know, well, in fact, I think portions of it are animated. You know, it's, you know, Creepshow is a magazine that has various horror stories in it, and there's kids reading through them, and it kind of shows the stories as they're being read. Twisted, humorous. It's kind of George Romero and Stephen King having a bit of fun, but at the same time it being really quite grisly. The cockroach story in Creepshow 1 is one of those that just, it makes me shiver thinking about it. And then, yeah, the raft in this stands out, but I recently watched it again and forgot how really fucking horrible the last story is, the hitchhiker story. Yeah. Do they still scare me now? I mean, Tales from the Crypt, I wouldn't say it still scares me now, but I get why I used to be scared of it. Not so much. Again, cockroach story gets me uncomfortable. Hitchhiker story, the scene in it where I think she looks in a rearview mirror and you see him running kind of towards the car in his yellow Mac and he's covered in blood. That's quite creepy. Yeah, they maybe don't affect me as much as the other films in this list because these are a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But yeah, some meritable and effective moments. And again, another one that doesn't affect me now but did freak me out as a kid is the Abominable Doctor Vibes. This is Vincent Price again. We're going back to Vincent Price. And these are sort of comedy horrors. There's the Abominable Doctor Vibes and the... is it Doctor Vibes Rises Again? It's the first film that I'm talking about. It's the story of a man whose wife dies during an operation, and he goes after the surgeons who he thinks are responsible and kills them off in the style of, I think, like the plagues of the Bible or something. Something like that. It's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, it's kind of, again, a little bit of a precursor to Saw. I know it seems silly holding that up and comparing it to such a notoriously nasty series, but you can see the seeds were planted. You know, it's like he has to kill various people in various ways. The, you know, creative kills, then quite nasty, quite grisly. The scene in Vibes that stands out is the frog mask scene. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. I might show a couple of clips through this video just to give an example of what I'm talking about. But yeah, and the scene as well in the plane, and the scene with the locusts. I think that's it. Yeah, doesn't scare me so much now. It's a really good film if you haven't seen it. But yeah, as a kid, watched it and thought, oh, that's quite nasty. I've just noticed on my list there's 2 films that I don't own that I'm going to talk about now, just so I don't forget. And they're really problematic films. I think they're both directed by the same piece of shit. I don't want to talk about these films in reference to the man who made them, because that seems to be where every conversation goes. If you don't want to watch the films because the man was a piece of shit, fine, but I'm talking about the films in isolation. Victor Salva, hate his name, he made a film called Clown House. Which is the story of some kids who get... I think there's a circus in town and some people escape from an asylum, kill some clowns, take the thing, and end up sort of bombarding these poor kids who are left alone.
Randy? Randy, you hear me?
Yeah, madmen in clown costumes. Not a very nice thought. Genuinely really creepy, genuinely quite scary. I haven't seen it in years, so I can't tell you if it still creeps me out, but I get the feeling it probably would. It's one of those films that has an unsettling edge all the way through it. And he also directed Jeepers Creepers, which is a slightly better known movie. Doesn't scare me now, but I remember distinctly seeing the scene where they drive past the creature's little hideout and he's kind of... does he throw a body down a pipe, or he's just stood there in his hat and his coat? That unsettled me as a kid. I didn't want to watch the film after seeing that scene. And it kind of got less scary the more you knew about him. I think he was scarier when he was just a man in a coat rather than a big winged mythical creature. But yeah, there's some really effective moments in there. Again, not pleasant to talk about because the person who made them's a bell end, to put it lightly. But yeah, 2 films that I thought were worth mentioning. Next up, we've got 3 left. Demons, or rather Demons 2. I really love these two films, but the film I'm going to talk about is the second one. The first one has I prefer the first film, but I think the second one's scarier. I know that sounds strange. The first one is gory, it's full of heavy metal music, it's just a really fun time. The second one is more of the same, but I just find it more unsettling. I think the makeup is slightly scarier, I want to say, on the demons. The scene where the demon comes through the TV and he's kind of giving that dead-eyed stare as he's walking towards the camera, that really freaked me out. Again, precursor to The Ring, some might say. You've got the scene in which they are stuck in the elevator. You've got the scene in the garage. Did you not actually the scene in the garage where the girl is in the car and they all sort of come up to the windows and they're like, yeah, that still gets me. I don't know why. Not very nice. But yeah, good little movies. Again, you might watch these and think they're not very scary at all, but this is my video. Fuck off and make your own if you're not happy with it. So yeah, that's Demons. I'm going to say Demons 2, but yeah, first one recommended as well. Penultimate film we're going to talk about is City of the Living Dead, which is the first in the Gates of Hell trilogy, directed by Lucio Fulci. It is one of those classic Italian horror films that doesn't make a lot of sense narratively, but kind of goes more for vibe than, you know, cohesion. And I think because they're a little bit unpredictable, they do tend to be a little bit more uneasy viewing. That goes for like quite a lot of Italian horror films that didn't really give a shit in the nicest possible way. I think the music in this is fantastic. The zombie makeup is some of the scariest zombie makeup I've ever seen. And it's one of the few, I'm not really too affected by gore, mostly, but there's a scene in this that really, really makes my stomach churn. And it did when I first saw it, and it still does now. And all I'm going to mention is, I can't really say it without telling you exactly what happens. Girl pukes up her own guts. Yeah, not a very nice scene. Really, really good movie. In fact, I think... Oh no, where is she? There she is. I've just remembered there. She's on the front cover. Not very nice. But yeah, great film. If you're after something that you can just detach from and enjoy the ride, City of the Living Dead, good choice. And lastly, this was a very last minute addition to this list because I watched it literally last night and forgot just how bizarre it is. Scary, bizarre? It freaks me out because it's so unpredictable and strange. It is Extra. If you follow me on Instagram, which you should, then you'll know that I literally watched this last night. I reviewed this for my Section 3 Video Nasties ranked series. I vaguely remember saying it was a film that made you feel sick, that made you feel like you weren't on this earth, that made you feel like the filmmakers were taking smack or something. I've watched it again and I fully stand by my opinion. When I say it makes you feel sick, I don't necessarily mean in the gore sense. There's a few bits of gore in it, but because it's like a pinball machine. It's like they kind of went, right, what scenes do we want to have in this film? We want to have a woman giving birth to a fully grown man. We want to have a clown doll that comes to life. We want to have an action man that comes to life. We want to have a snake that gets hit with a hammer. We want to have, what else? Bloody dog alien that gets hit by a car. And then they went, right, how can we tie all that together? And it kind of makes for a really surreal experience. It's fever dreamish, you don't really know what you're watching, but it sort of makes sense when you think about it. Yeah, it's a really, really good little movie. The sequels aren't much to talk about, apparently. But yeah, not a film that I think too many people are that familiar with. I know some people have commented on my Instagram post and said they really like this one. But yeah, if you're into... This is a weird one. You have to really let it do what it wants to do in order to enjoy it. But I really do enjoy it because I think it represents something that I wish filmmakers did more often, and that's just have a bit of fucking confidence. Like, you don't always have to make a film that goes from A to B to C to D to end. You can go, you know what, if we want to have a scene of this, let's just put it in and people are going to have to deal with it. Yeah, I kind of respect that attitude. It's kind of quite punky. But yeah, queasy is how I'm going to describe Extra. Not necessarily frightening, but queasy. apart from the scene where the dog alien gets hit by the car, something about it really freaks me out. Extra. Thus concludes the video. So yeah, I'm really genuinely interested to see what people have to say. If you've seen any of the films that I've mentioned, let me know what you think. Call me a pussy if you want. But yeah, these are just some films that, when I think about films that affected me as a kid that still freak me out now, these came to mind. They might not be the scariest films ever made, they might not be the best films ever made, but this is, as I said, my video, my list. Comment below if you would like to let me know films that still freak you out. Recommendations for me, if you have any. If you think, you know, if you've seen these and you think, oh, you might like this, let me know. But yeah, mostly I'm interested to see what films still freak you guys out, because if you watch a lot of horror films, you do become desensitized to it, and when a film affects you in any way, it becomes noteworthy. So yeah, I think regardless of quality, if a film can do that, there's merit there, which is always a nice thing. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Happy Halloween if I don't make a video before then, and goodbye.